Hello there, I'm Martino, and today we're going to find out, is Club Brugge worth visiting as a footy trip? We're going to score 10 different categories, mark it out of 100, and we're going to find out. So, let's do this.
After 2.5 years of talking and dreaming about my next overseas adventure, the time finally came. Hooking up with the Meadows bros, Lee and Dave, Belgium was our chosen destination. The combination of cheap flights, small distances between stadiums, a fine selection of beer, but more importantly, being the home of the roving reporter, Tintin, made it a rather easy choice for our next soiree into Europe. A quick check of the fixture list and the Friday night matchup of reigning champions Club Brugge versus Zulte Waregem jumped out and the decision was made. Return flights to Brussels from Manchester were picked up for a reasonable £60 each, given our commitment not to changing clothes too often, and we were ready to go. After another Ryanair flight landed on time in French-speaking Brussels, we jumped straight on the bus to the Flemish-speaking Bruges. As you may know, Belgium has two languages that are generally spoken. 60% of the country speaks Flemish and 40% French. The split is pretty much north and south, with Flemish being the language of the Northern Territory of Flanders, and French being the language of the Southern Territory of Wallonia, leaving Brussels in the middle as its own little region. This was my second visit to Bruges after a TFC tour back in 2015, with the personal highlight being the purchase of some bright yellow pants. However, this time I thought I'd do a little more digging into the history of the team and the city, rather than just rolling up and sampling the beverages.
For anyone not interested in the history of Bruges, feel free to skip this bit, but personally, I always find these little nuggets incredibly fascinating. Records of Bruges date back to the 3rd century BC, when a Gallo-Roman settlement was discovered. And by the 7th century, the Vikings had arrived, and then they named it Brugge. Due to its proximity to the North Sea and therefore UK and Scandinavia, it was the perfect location for trading back in the day. Towards the end of the 13th century, divisions were growing between the peasants and the nobility. The Flemish in Flanders began to rise up against the French rulers, leading to the Franco-Flemish War in 1297. The French occupation of Flanders continued for several years, but one night in May 1302, the French held a huge feast celebrating their continued rule. Knowing the French would be worse for wear, the next morning, the Flemish people, led by Peter de Koning and Jan Breydel, more on him later, launched an attack in the early hours the next morning. They entered the garrison and massacred around 2,000 soldiers while they slept. These events became known as the Bruges Matin. As expected, the French retaliated, but they were outfought and defeated in the Battle of the Golden Spurs on July the 11th the same year. In 1970, this day was made the official holiday of the Flemish community, highlighting the significance of these events. If any of that was remotely interesting, then check out the film The Lion of Flanders on YouTube for the full story. Back in Bruges, the trading continued, and in 1309 the first stock market was formed. By the 15th century, Bruges was the centre of the trading world. Unfortunately, over the years, the Zwin inlet that connects Bruges to the North Sea began to sill, and eventually limiting the access and therefore trade to Bruges. Combined with the rising status of Antwerp as a trading city, the economic decline began. To the extent that by the time Belgium finally became an independent country in 1830, Bruges was one of the poorest cities in the country. In a pleasant twist of irony, the lack of progress and development meant it retained much of its medieval charm, and by the late 19th century it started to become a tourist attraction. As the tourism grew, more and more older buildings were restored, and it is now a beautiful picturesque town full of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, welcoming 8 million tourists a year. A little bit more history, but this time about our hosts, Club Brugge. Club Brugge were formed in 1891 and were participants of the inaugural Belgian League. Known as Football Club Brugeois in the early years, and later adding the royal prefix in 1920 to celebrate their first league title. Much of the next 50 years was spent in the lower divisions without great success. The change to the Flemish name in 1972 to the unpronounceable Koninklijke Vereniging Club Brugge seemed to bring unprecedented success under the legendary Austrian manager Ernst Happel. He led Brugge to 3 successive league titles between 75 and 78, and during those years, the UEFA Cup final against Liverpool. 2 years later, they became the first Belgian team to reach the European Cup final, but again fell to their Sqaure rivals. At the same time, another great rivalry was forming closer to home with Anderlecht. The majority of the titles were shared between these two, as well as 3 cup finals. To this day, they continue to battle out as the best team in Belgium, with Brugge's 18 league titles second only to Anderlecht's 34. During this successful period, a new stadium was built, the Olympiastadion, which is shared with rival Cercle Bruges. 25 years on, the stadium required upgrading to reach the required UEFA standard to be considered for the upcoming Euro 2000. This was only possible with funding from the Flemish Council. Part of the deal was for the stadium to have a more Flemish name, and this is where again we meet the hero of 1302 Bruges Matin, Jan Breydel. Again highlighting the Flemish significance of those aforementioned events. Since then, the home of the 2 Bruges teams has been known as the Jan Breydel Stadium. There's even been an annual pre-season friendly tournament named the Bruges Matin. In more recent times, Bruges have won 4 of the last 6 Belgian titles, including the last 2, doing everything they can to knock Anderlecht off their perch. Despite losing young superstar Charles de Ketelaere to AC Milan, as the season commenced, they were still overwhelming favourites for this year's Jupiler League title. Nothing less than victory will be expected against Zulte Waregem, so let's see what they got in store for us to enjoy this lovely ground before Bruges move to their new planned 40,000 seat stadium in the coming years. Due to late arrival in Bruges, it was a case of dropping the bags and straight in a taxi for the 10-minute trip to the stadium. With a bit of time to spare, we picked up a beer at Colmado, a perfect little shop selling beers and snacks a couple of 100 metres from the ground, and on we went. It was such a buzz to be walking down towards a foreign ground after so long without travel, joining the hordes of Blauwensvaart fans as the stadium appeared when we turned around the corner. A quick search for some scarves and magnets and we were ready to enjoy the atmosphere. Once we worked out the system for buying drinks using a loyalty card, we were set to take our seats with beer in hand for the first time in God knows how long. After a less than inspiring rendition of You'll Never Walk Alone, the game kicked off to picturesque views with the sun setting beautifully in the distance. We were expecting a one-sided affair. Bruges had won the last 5 against Zulte, scoring 20 goals without reply. Both teams started the season with the same record, with a win and a loss each, and this seemed to be reflected in the cagey atmosphere among the fans at the start of the game. Bruges maintained possession well, and despite creating a few half chances, they lacked the cutting edge up front to take the lead in the first half. Much of this down to the battling defending of Nudu Tambedu. Marks out of 10 for the beer and the service, Davey.
I'm going to go with 4.5. There was no queuing, was there? I'm going to go for a steady 7.5.
In stark contrast, the second half started with a bang, as within 2 minutes of the restart, the young Danish winger Andreas Sqaure put the home team in front, which seemed to settle the nerves around the stadium as the atmosphere improved. However, due to our proximity to the away fans, it was them who were making themselves heard, despite their lowly number. And much to their delight, their vigorous support was rewarded on 69 minutes when Alexander Drambeyev restored parity shortly after their star man and my Sqaure striker Jelvossen was removed due to injury. As expected, Zulte were happy to hold on for the draw, and that's exactly what happened as Bruges struggled to break down a resolute defence. The away fans set off elated for their short journey home across Flanders, as the home fans filtered out towards the bars in the car park. And us back to Colmado for a debrief with the locals, enjoyed with the Grunbergen and a few Wurstenbrötchen to appease the appetite. On being told there were a couple of bars around the corner, we didn't expect too much, but we were pleasantly surprised with the nightlife despite being so far from the centre. Joined by many Brugge Ultras, the place was bouncing despite the result as people began their weekends. After a couple of hours and managed to drag me out of the techno bar, we were set off for a long walk home, but there was still time for one major drama. After a couple of miles of walking, we ended up back in the town centre and we're crossing over this nice quaint little bridge, all very dark, and this cyclist flies past us going at some speed. Me and Dave will look at each other and I'm sure he shouted something but can't recall what, and suddenly he just hit this almighty bang and we look back and all the pretty decoration on the bridge is all ruffled and out of place, so we head over to see what's gone on. And as we get there, Davey just says, this guy's got blood pouring from his head. So we go over, look at him, he's not moving at all. So we shout over Big Lee, the more responsible one of the three of us. And eventually we track down some locals that call an ambulance. But while we're waiting, had a bit of a chat with this guy once he came round, blood pouring from his eye socket. And turns out he's Mexican, so it was a nice unexpected opportunity to practice some Spanish, but thankfully all was well. The ambulance came and took him away, and Efrain, if you're out there, drive safely and hope your face is looking a bit better than it was that night. Good luck, man. Look at the state of those flowers, Dave. Look at them.
Yeah, right. It's got thank you. Thanks.
Said I wanna love you and treat you right.
Sadly, due to the heavy schedule, there was little time for tourism in Bruges. For breakfast the next morning, we bit the bullet and paid for the views, directly opposite the Belfry of Bruges in the stunning main square. Traditional mussels were consumed alongside a pint of Bruges Zot, one of the finest beers I've ever tasted. A beautiful start to the day, if not the most sensible in topping up the alcohol levels from the night before. The 83-metre tall Belfry of Bruges and river cruises, the main enjoyment is simply wandering the streets, bar hopping and enjoying the wonderful views this medieval city has to offer. One certainty for my next trip will be the Halfman Brewery, which pumps its beer out of the city via a 2-mile pipeline in order to avoid huge trucks coming into the centre. Best get checking the Circle Bruges fixtures. So, as mentioned at the start of the video, the intention of this is to rate Club Brugge as a football trip out of 100. So we'll start from the top. Team ability,
over recent years, a top team in Belgium, which is the 13th best league in the world, and regular appearance in the Champions League group stages, so we're going to go with a solid 7 out of 10. Atmosphere, 2/3 full, decent away fans, if even a small amount, good home fans too generally, but not a crazy atmosphere, so we'll go 6 out of 10. Stadium quality, not too old, 1975 built, fairly basic, nothing too much to write home about, but yeah, decent size as well, 6.5. Beer and food at stadium, annoying fan cards where you can't use cash, can't use cards, just got to use their fan cards, but decent Jupiler, you can't complain, and more importantly, you could drink in your seats, which is perfect. But 7.5, we'll give that one. Tourism in the city, it's Bruges at the end of the day, one of the top tourist destinations in Europe, so solid 9 out of 10, can't go wrong. Accessibility, affordable flights from Brussels, only 2 hours from Manchester for me, but then you've got another hour on top of it on the train or the bus, but overall would say 7 out of 10. People, generally nice, friendly people everywhere we went, always happy to have a chat about the football, talk about where you're from, where they're from, so that was quite nice. Stadium surroundings, although we didn't get much time beforehand, a couple of nice bars, beers around the stadium, and then even plenty of room to go and have a party after with a very short walk away. So solid 8 out of 10 there. Club history, founded in 1891, 18 league titles, 2 runners-up spots in European competition, and a stadium named after a hero from the 1300s, so what more can you say? 8 out of 10. And ease and cost of getting tickets, purchase was a bit of a pain, needed to create accounts, needed passports, etc, but plenty of tickets available and good communication from the club, so overall pretty good. Personal milestones for me on this trip, I've now watched football in 15 countries around the world, which is now 8% of the 196 countries, and 10 of those in Europe, which is 18%, and my first trip to Belgium, so very happy with that. Great trip, and look forward to the next one. I'll see you there. Goodbye, Bruges. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the place to place yourself when life's torn apart.